Hi and welcome to the Archive of History. Imagine the Pacific Ocean in the centuries before maps, before compasses, before the written word. Picture a vast blue wilderness stretching 10,000 miles from one horizon to another, dotted with tiny specks of volcanic rock and coral, islands so small and so far apart that finding them seems like an impossibility. And yet, across this immense and seemingly empty expanse, people traveled, not by accident, not by luck, but by design and extraordinary skill. They sailed in double-hulled canoes made of wood and rope and woven fiber, carrying their families, their food plants, their animals, and their gods. They navigated by the stars, by the waves, by the flight of birds and the color of clouds. They discovered and settled nearly every habitable island in the Pacific, from Hawaii in the north to New Zealand in the south, from Easter Island in the east to the edges of Southeast Asia in the west. This is the story of the greatest maritime achievement in human history. This is the story of the first Polynesian navigators. Tonight you will sail with them. You will stand on the deck of a voyaging canoe as it pushes away from the reef and into the open ocean. You will learn to read the stars as they wheel overhead through the long tropical nights. You will feel the rhythm of the swells beneath the hull and learn what they are telling you about distant lands beyond the horizon. You will taste the salt spray on your lips and feel the sun bake your skin. You will know the thirst, the exhaustion, the uncertainty, and the transcendent joy of sighting land after weeks at sea. This journey will take you into a world that no longer exists in quite the same way, a world where the ocean was not a barrier but a highway, where courage and knowledge were the only tools needed to cross the largest body of water on Earth. Before we drift off, I am always curious to know where my listeners are tuning in from and what time it is that they are listening tonight. Let me know in the comments. Now let the noise of the modern world fade away. Let yourself drift back 3,000 years. To a time when the Pacific was still a mystery waiting to be explored, when the greatest adventure in human history was just beginning. Settle in, close your eyes, and let us sail together into the blue heart of the ocean. The world you were born into is small, but it is not simple. Your island rises from the sea like a green jewel, its peaks shrouded in mist that never quite lifts even at midday, its valleys thick with breadfruit trees, whose massive trunks support a canopy so dense that the forest floor beneath is dim and cool even in the heat of the day. Coconut palms line the beaches, their fronds rustling with the constant trade wind that blows from the east, bringing with it the taste of salt and the promise of rain. In the interior, where the land rises and the streams run cold and clear from the mountains, taro grows in terraced gardens, the broad green leaves catching the sunlight that filters through the clouds. Banana plants cluster in groves, their fruit hanging heavy on the stalks. The island provides everything you need, but that provision is the result of generations of careful cultivation, of knowledge passed down about which plants to grow where, when to harvest, how to tend the soil. The reef that encircles your island is a living wall, a barrier between the calm lagoon and the open ocean beyond. At low tide you can walk on parts of it, carefully placing your feet between the sharp coral heads, watching the tide pools where tiny fish dart and sea urchins cluster in the shadows. The reef is a garden, a source of food more reliable than any crop on land. You learn to dive with your eyes open in the salt water, to hold your breath for minutes at a time while you pry loose an octopus from its hiding place or spear a parrotfish as it grazes on the coral. The colors underwater are more vivid than anything on land, blues and purples and yellows and reds that seem to glow with their own light. Sea turtles glide through the clear water like slow-moving clouds, their flippers beating with a rhythm that is ancient and peaceful. You learn to respect them, to take only what you need, because the reef is not infinite, and it must provide for your children and your children's children. Beyond the reef, the ocean stretches away to the edge of everything. From the beach, on a clear day, you can see perhaps 20 miles before the curve of the earth drops the horizon out of sight. But the ocean extends far beyond what you can see. It extends for thousands of miles in every direction, a blue vastness that fills the horizon and dominates the world. At night, when the village is dark and quiet and you lie on your sleeping mat, listening to the soft crash of waves on the reef, you can hear the ocean breathing. It is a sound that never stops, a rhythm that is deeper than time, and it whispers with the voices of ancestors and gods. The ocean is alive. It is not just water, not just a physical thing. It is a presence, a force, a realm where the spirits dwell and where mortals venture at their peril. And yet it is also a highway, a pathway, a means of connection. The ocean separates islands, but it also connects them. It is both barrier and bridge, and learning to navigate it is the work of a lifetime. You are born into a family of navigators. This is not a profession you choose. It is a calling that runs in the blood, passed from father to son, from uncle to nephew, through generations that stretch back to the first people who came to this island in the great canoes of legend. Your family's lineage is recited in chants that take hours to perform, names stretching back 30 generations or more, each generation marked by the accomplishments of its navigators, the islands they discovered, the voyages they made. The stories say your ancestors came from the west, from islands whose names are still remembered in the chants, places with names like Hawaii and Avaki, distant homelands shrouded now in legend and time. They came guided by a navigator whose skill was so great that he could find a tiny island in the trackless ocean as surely as you could find your own house in the dark. His name is still spoken with reverence, and his descendants, of which you are one, carry the weight of that legacy. These stories are not myths. They are history, encoded in poetry and song, memorized and passed down with a precision that rivals any written record. When your grandfather recites the chants, he does not improvise or embellish. He speaks the exact words that were taught to him, which were taught to his teacher, which were taught back through the generations. The chants contain not just names but also navigation instructions, descriptions of the stars to follow, the winds to use, the currents to avoid. They describe the shape of islands, the location of reefs, the places where fresh water can be found. This is practical knowledge, survival knowledge, encoded in a form that can be remembered and transmitted without writing. Your education begins almost from birth. Even as a small child, you are taken down to the beach at night to look at the stars. Your grandfather points to them, naming them, telling you their stories. That bright star rising in the east, that is Hokulea, Arcturus in the European naming, but to your people, it is the star of gladness, the star that guides voyagers to Hawaii, the great northern archipelago that lies weeks of sailing away, that cluster of stars there, shaped like a fishhook, that is Maui's fishhook, and it points the way south. The two stars that shine brightly in the early evening, those are the navigators, the pointers that mark important directions. Your grandfather does not just point and name, he makes you repeat the names back to him, over and over, until they are burned into your memory. He makes you close your eyes and point to where each star should be, training your mind to hold a map of the sky, even when you cannot see it. As you grow older, the lessons become more complex and more demanding. You learn the star compass, the fundamental tool of Polynesian navigation. The star compass is not a physical object, it is a mental construct, a way of dividing the sky into houses or directions. The horizon is divided into 32 points, each one marking a direction, each one associated with specific stars that rise and set in that part of the sky. The navigator memorizes all of these houses, all of the stars, and uses them to maintain a course across the ocean. When you want to sail in a particular direction, you do not point your canoe toward a distant landmark, because there are no landmarks at sea. Instead, you point your canoe toward the house where certain stars will rise, and you keep those stars ahead of you as they climb into the sky. When they rise too high to be useful, you shift to other stars in the same house. In this way, you can maintain a constant heading through the night, even though the individual stars are constantly moving. Learning the star compass takes years. It is not enough to memorize the names and positions. You must internalize them, make them part of your body, so that you can navigate almost without thinking. Your grandfather takes you out in a small canoe, just the two of you, and paddles out beyond the reef at night. He makes you lie in the bottom of the hull with your eyes closed, feeling the motion of the swells, and then he asks you to point to where Hokulea will rise. If you are wrong, he corrects you, and you try again. This training continues, night after night, season after season, until you can point to any star's rising or setting point without hesitation, in any weather, at any time of year. You learn the waves, and this is perhaps the most difficult and subtle art of all. The ocean, your grandfather tells you, is never still and never silent. It speaks in swells, the long rolling waves that travel across thousands of miles of open water, generated by distant storms you will never see. Storms in the Southern Ocean beyond the horizon, storms in the far north, storms that happened days or even weeks ago. Each swell has a direction and a rhythm, a period and a height, and these characteristics tell you about the weather system that created it. The trade wind swells, the ones that come from the east and southeast for most of the year, are the most reliable. They march across the Pacific in endless ranks, rising and falling with a rhythm so regular you can count it, and they are the baseline, the foundation upon which all other observations are built. But there are other swells as well, swells that come from different directions, generated by different weather systems. In the winter months, swells from the north arrive, long and powerful, generated by storms in the northern Pacific. In the summer, swells from the south become stronger, generated by storms circling Antarctica. These swells travel for thousands of miles across open ocean, and by the time they reach your island, they have become smooth and regular. No longer the chaotic wind-driven waves of the storm that created them, but long smooth undulations that roll beneath the surface, even when the sea appears calm. The key to reading swells is understanding that they do not cancel each other out. When two swells from different directions meet, they interfere, creating a complex pattern of motion. The canoe rises and falls with the combined effect of all the swells present, rocking and rolling in what seems like a random pattern. But it is not random, if you know how to feel it. If you can separate the different components in your mind, you can identify the direction of each swell. This is the art that takes years to master. The art that separates a competent sailor from a true navigator. Your grandfather teaches you by making you lie in the bottom of a canoe, your body pressed against the curved hull, your eyes closed. You float just beyond the reef where the water is deep and the swells are clear, and you feel the motion of the hull as it rocks and rolls. At first it is just a confusing jumble of sensations. The canoe lifts and drops, tilts to one side and then the other, and you cannot make sense of it. But your grandfather is patient. He lies beside you and describes what he is feeling. That long, slow rise and fall, that is the trade wind swell from the east. That shorter, choppier motion superimposed on it, that is the local wind wave generated by today's breeze. That occasional larger surge that seems to come from a different direction entirely, that is a swell from the south, generated by a storm far away. You practice this for hours, for days, for weeks. Gradually your body learns to separate the different motions, to identify the direction and period of each swell. You learn to feel them even through the other movements of the canoe, the rocking caused by people moving around on deck, the surge when the sail catches a gust of wind. The swells are always there, underneath everything else, and once you learn to feel them, you have a compass that works even in the darkest night, even in the worst weather. As long as you can feel the direction of the primary swell, you can maintain your course. This is the secret knowledge that allows navigators to cross hundreds of miles of open ocean without seeing land, without seeing the stars, navigating by touch alone. You also learn the birds, and this knowledge is equally complex and equally vital. Seabirds are creatures of habit, and their behavior changes with their distance from land. Your grandfather takes you out in the canoe during the day and teaches you to watch the birds, to observe their flight patterns, their calls, their feeding behavior. That white tern, the graceful bird with the delicate black wings that hovers and dips over the water, flies out to sea in the morning to feed and returns to land at dusk. If you see white terns in the morning, flying strongly in a particular direction, and you follow that direction, you know you are heading away from land. But if you see them in the late afternoon or evening, streaming past you in a consistent direction, you know land is in the direction they are flying, because they are going home to roost. The frigate bird, the great ocean wanderer with its forked tail and impossibly long wings that allow it to soar for hours without flapping, ranges farther from shore than the tern. A frigate bird can be 100 miles from land, riding the thermals, scanning the ocean for fish. But even the frigate bird must return to land eventually, to roost and to breed. If you see many frigates in the sky, circling and calling, if you see them repeatedly, day after day, you know land is somewhere within a day or two of sailing, even if you cannot see it. The direction they fly in the evening gives you a rough bearing to follow. The booby, the large diving bird with the comical gait and the bright blue feet, is another indicator. Boobies feed by plunging into the water from a height, and they cannot take off from the water easily, so they stay relatively close to land, within perhaps 50 miles. If you see boobies diving and feeding, you know you are approaching the zone where land is near. If you see them flying high and purposefully in a particular direction, rather than feeding, you know they are heading home and you can follow them. The noddies, small dark terns that nest in colonies on small islands and atolls, are perhaps the most reliable indicator of all for low-lying land. Noddies range only about 30 miles from their nesting sites, and they return every evening without fail. If you see a stream of noddies flying in a consistent direction at dusk, you know there is land in that direction, and it is close, within a night's sailing. The navigators have a saying, "Follow the noddy home." But you learn that bird behavior is not just about direction. It also tells you about the weather, about the presence of fish, about the nature of the land you are approaching. If birds are feeding frantically, diving and calling, it means there is a school of fish below, and you can catch some for dinner. If birds are flying high and fast, heading in a particular direction with urgency, it may mean a storm is coming and they are seeking shelter. If you see land birds, birds that do not normally venture over the open ocean, blown out to sea, it tells you that there has been a storm on land, strong winds that have swept them away from their home. These birds are lost, and if you follow them, they will lead you nowhere. You must learn to distinguish between seabirds, which know where they are going, and land birds which do not. You learn the clouds, and this is knowledge that seems almost magical in its subtlety and its power. In the vast empty sky of the tropical Pacific, clouds are messages written in vapor and light, and learning to read them is like learning a language. A certain kind of greenish tint in the underside of a cloud tells you there is a lagoon beneath it, the shallow turquoise water reflecting up onto the white base of the cloud. This is called a lagoon glint, and it can be seen from 30 or 40 miles away, long before the island itself is visible. It is one of the most reliable signs of a low-lying atoll, the type of island that is hardest to see because it barely rises above the water. A tall, anvil-shaped cloud that rises high into the sky and stays in one place, building and growing throughout the morning, often marks the position of a mountainous island. The land forces the warm, moist air upward, and as the air rises, it cools and condenses, forming clouds that tower up to 20 or 30,000 feet. These clouds are easy to see from a great distance, and they are stationary, anchored to the island below. Even if the island itself is below the horizon, the cloud can be seen, a signpost in the sky pointing the way. You learn to scan the horizon at dawn and dusk when the light is low and the clouds glow with color, looking for these signs. The low-angle light makes the cloud patterns more visible, highlighting the different textures and colors. A line of clouds on the horizon, aligned in a particular direction, may indicate a chain of islands or a reef. Cumulus clouds that form in a ring or a pattern often indicate the presence of an atoll, the warm air rising from the lagoon creating a localized weather system. But clouds tell you more than just the location of land. They also tell you about the weather, about what is coming, about whether you should prepare for a storm or expect fair sailing. High, thin cirrus clouds, wispy and delicate, often precede a change in the weather, a storm system moving in from hundreds of miles away. Thick, dark nimbus clouds, heavy with rain, mean that a squall is approaching, and you should be ready to take down the sail and ride it out. Clear skies with scattered cumulus, the puffy white clouds that dot the tropical sky, mean fair weather and good sailing. You learn the color and taste of the water, and this knowledge, too, has layers of meaning. Near land, the ocean is often cloudy with sediment washed down from rivers or stirred up by the waves breaking on the reef. The water has a greenish or brownish tint, and it is not as clear as the deep ocean water. Farther out, away from land, the ocean is a deep indigo blue, clear to astonishing depths. You can look down through 100 feet of water and see the bottom, see the white sand and the dark patches of coral. You learn to read the shade of blue, to know when you are over deep water and when you are approaching shallow banks or submerged reefs. Deep water is a darker, richer blue. Shallow water is lighter, brighter, sometimes almost turquoise. You learn to taste the water for salinity, and this is a skill that requires a sensitive palate and years of practice. Fresh water, flowing out from a river mouth, will mix with the salt water and create a zone where the ocean is less salty than usual, a brackish mixture that can be detected by taste. If you are desperately thirsty, you can sometimes find these zones by tasting the water as you sail and gather a little relief, though the water is still too brackish to drink in any quantity. It is better than nothing, and in the extremities of a long voyage, it can be the difference between life and death. The salinity of the water also varies with depth and location. Deep ocean water is very salty, the salt concentrated by evaporation. Water near the surface in areas of heavy rainfall is less salty, diluted by the fresh water falling from the sky. You learn to detect these variations, and they tell you about the currents, about the weather patterns, about the invisible flows that move through the ocean. You learn the names of the winds, the way they shift with the seasons, the way certain winds bring rain and certain winds bring fair weather. The great trade winds, the steady easterly winds that blow across the tropical Pacific for most of the year, are the dominant feature of the ocean's atmosphere. They blow from the east or slightly north of east, driven by the rotation of the Earth and the heating of the equatorial regions. These winds are the highways that will carry you west, and they are so reliable that you can plan voyages around them, knowing that for 8 or 9 months of the year, they will blow steadily, day after day, pushing your canoe westward across the ocean. But the trade winds are not the only winds. In the winter months the trades weaken and other wind patterns assert themselves. Winds from the north and northwest, bringing cooler air and sometimes rain, become more common. These winds are less reliable, more variable, and they make navigation more difficult. In the summer months the trades are strong and steady, and this is the best time for voyaging, when you can count on the wind to carry you swiftly and surely to your destination. There are also the local winds, the breezes that blow on a smaller scale, generated by the heating and cooling of land and sea. During the day, the land heats up faster than the ocean, and the warm air rises, creating a low-pressure area that draws in cooler air from the sea. This creates an onshore breeze, a wind that blows from the ocean toward the land, strongest in the afternoon. At night, the pattern reverses. The land cools faster than the ocean, and the air flows back out to sea, creating an offshore breeze. These local winds are not strong enough to carry you across the ocean, but they are useful for coastal sailing, for leaving an island or approaching one. You learn to feel the wind on your face, on your skin, to judge its strength and direction without thinking. You learn to distinguish between a steady wind and a gusty one, between a wind that will last all day and one that will die away in an hour. This knowledge becomes instinctive, part of your body's awareness of the world around you. You learn, above all, patience and respect. The ocean is not your enemy, but it is not your friend. It is a vast living presence, a realm of gods and spirits, and you are a small and fragile visitor in it. The ocean has no malice, but it has no mercy either. It simply is vast and powerful and indifferent to human desires. You learn the prayers and chants that must be said before a voyage, the offerings that must be made to the gods who rule the sea. You learn that the canoe must be blessed, purified, made sacred before it can venture onto the open ocean. You learn that the navigator must be in a state of ritual purity, must have observed the proper taboos, must have made the proper offerings. The rituals are not superstition. They are a way of focusing the mind, of preparing yourself mentally and spiritually for the challenges ahead. When you chant the prayers before a voyage, when you make offerings to the gods, you are not just asking for protection. You are also reminding yourself of the seriousness of what you are about to do, the dangers you will face, the responsibilities you carry. You are placing yourself in the tradition of the navigators who came before you, connecting yourself to the generations of ancestors who made this same journey, who faced these same dangers, who succeeded or failed according to their skill and the favor of the gods. You learn that the knowledge you are receiving is sacred, that it is a gift from your ancestors, and that you have a duty to preserve it and pass it on. The knowledge is not written down. It cannot be. Your people have no writing, no books, no charts. Everything must be held in memory, memorized so completely that it becomes part of you, so that you can recall it instantly, even in the worst conditions, even when you are exhausted and frightened, and the canoe is being tossed by waves and you cannot think clearly. The knowledge must be practiced constantly, rehearsed, tested, so that it remains sharp and accurate. Your grandfather tells you stories of navigators who forgot a crucial detail, who confused one star with another, who misread the signs, and who died as a result, their canoes lost at sea, their bones resting on the bottom of the ocean. These stories are not meant to frighten you, though they do. They are meant to impress upon you the importance of attention, of precision, of never becoming complacent or careless. The ocean forgives nothing. As you grow older, you begin to understand the purpose of all this training. Your people are voyagers. They have always been voyagers, for reasons that are both practical and spiritual. They do not stay in one place. Islands can become crowded. Resources can be depleted. families can quarrel, and always there is the pull of the horizon, the knowledge that somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the known world, there are new islands waiting to be found. Every generation, it seems, a canoe is prepared for a long voyage. Sometimes the destination is known, a distant island that was visited by someone's grandfather, a place where relatives still live. Sometimes the destination is unknown, a matter of following the flight of birds or the direction of ocean currents, a leap of faith into the blue. And now, it is your time. A great double-hulled voyaging canoe has been under construction for nearly a year, and you have been chosen to be part of its crew. Not as the navigator, not yet. You are too young, too untested. But you will sail as an apprentice, a student who will watch and learn and perhaps, if the gods are kind, one day command a voyage of your own. The preparations are nearly complete. The canoe is being loaded, the rituals are being performed, and soon, very soon, you will leave the only home you have ever known and sail into the unknown. The canoe that will carry you across the ocean is not like the small fishing canoes you have paddled in the lagoon since you were a child. It is a marvel of engineering and craftsmanship, the product of months of labor by the finest builders on the island, men who have devoted their entire lives to perfecting the art of canoe construction. It is a double-hulled vessel, two long narrow hulls joined side by heavy crossbeams, with a platform built across the top that serves as the deck and living space. The design is ancient, refined over generations, every element serving a purpose, nothing wasted, nothing ornamental. It is a machine for crossing oceans, and it is beautiful in its functionality. Each hull is made from hollowed logs, and the selection of these logs is itself a sacred and complex process. The trees must be tall and straight, without knots or defects, and they must be the right species, a hardwood that is strong but not too heavy, resistant to rot and shipworms. The canoe builders walk through the forest for days, examining trees, tapping them to hear the sound of the wood, looking for the perfect specimens. When they find a suitable tree, they perform rituals, asking permission from the spirits of the forest, making offerings. The felling of the tree is done with stone adzes, broad-bladed tools lashed to wooden handles, and it takes many men working in shifts for days to bring down a single large tree. The logs are then dragged to the beach, a task that requires the entire village. Teams of men pull on ropes of woven coconut fiber, straining and sweating as they haul the massive logs over rollers made from smaller trees, slowly working them down the mountain trails to the shore. It is back-breaking work, and it is done with ceremony and songs, chants that keep the rhythm and honor the ancestors who first taught these skills. On the beach, the real work of shaping begins. The logs are laid out on supports, raised off the sand, and the builders begin to hollow them. This is done entirely with stone adzes, no saws, no drills, just the rhythmic striking of the adzed blade against the wood, chips flying, the sound echoing along the beach. The builders work from dawn to dusk, day after day, slowly carving away the interior of the log, creating a hollow shell that is thin enough to be light but thick enough to be strong. They measure the thickness with their hands, feeling the wood, tapping it to hear the tone. Too thick, and the canoe will be heavy and slow. Too thin, and it will crack and leak when stressed by the waves. The balance must be perfect. The shaping of the exterior is equally important. The hull must be sleek and streamlined, designed to cut through the water with minimal resistance. The bow is carved into a graceful, upswept shape, rising high out of the water to shed waves and spray. The stern is tapered and fine, allowing the water to flow smoothly past. The bottom is rounded, not flat, giving the hull a natural tendency to track straight, but also allowing it to heel and turn when needed. Every curve, every angle, is the result of generations of accumulated knowledge, refined by trial and error, optimized for speed and stability. But a single hollowed log is not large enough for a hull. To achieve the necessary length and depth, the builders add strakes, planks of wood that extend the height of the hull. These are shaped to fit precisely against the carved log base, and they are attached not with nails or screws which do not exist, but with lashings. Holes are drilled through the planks and the hull using pointed bones or shells, and senet, the strong braided cord made from coconut husk fiber, is threaded through the holes and pulled tight. The lashing is done in complex patterns that distribute the stress evenly, and it is soaked in water to swell the fibers before being allowed to dry and tighten. When done properly, The lashed joints are as strong as the wood itself, and they have the advantage of being flexible, able to give and move slightly as the hull works in the waves, absorbing stress rather than cracking. The seams between the planks are caulked with a paste made from breadfruit sap mixed with fiber, pounded and worked until it is sticky and pliable, then pressed into the gaps and smoothed over. As it dries, it hardens into a waterproof seal that keeps the ocean out. The entire hull is then treated with coconut oil, rubbed into the wood to protect it from water and sun, to keep it from drying out and cracking. The oil gives the wood a rich, dark patina, and it fills the air with a sweet, nutty smell. 2 of these hulls are built, identical in every way, and they are laid out parallel to each other, about 10 feet apart. The distance is critical. Too close, and the platform between them will be cramped and unstable. Too far, and the crossbeams will be too long and too heavy, and the structure will be weak. The crossbeams that will connect the hulls are themselves major pieces of engineering. They are hewn from the hardest wood available, logs that are shaped into massive beams, rectangular in cross-section, strong enough to resist bending even when the canoe is heaving in heavy seas. Each beam is perhaps 15 feet long, a foot wide, and 6 inches thick, and there are 4 or 5 of them, spaced evenly along the length of the hulls. The attachment of the crossbeams to the hulls is the most critical part of the entire construction. This joint will bear all the stress of the voyage, all the twisting and flexing as the canoe moves through the waves, and if it fails, the canoe will come apart and sink. The builders carve notches into the top edge of each hull, precisely shaped to receive the ends of the crossbeams. The beams are then laid across, fitting into the notches, and they are lashed down with incredibly complex and strong lashings, senet wrapped around and through in patterns that have been perfected over centuries. Wooden pegs, carved from hard tropical wood, are driven through holes drilled at angles, pinning the beams in place. The lashings are tightened until they hum with tension, and then they are coated with more breadfruit paste to seal them and protect them from the salt water. On top of the crossbeams, a platform is built. This is the deck of the canoe, the living and working space for the crew. It is constructed from lighter wood, poles lashed together to form a frame, and covered with a surface of split bamboo or thin planks. The platform is wide enough for people to sit or lie down, with enough space for the supplies that will be needed on the voyage. At the center of the platform, a small shelter is built, a simple house of woven pandanus leaves stretched over a frame of poles. The pandanus leaves are prepared in advance, the long spiky leaves cut and dried and then woven into mats that are both flexible and waterproof. The mats are laid overlapping, like shingles on a roof, so that rain runs off rather than soaking through. The shelter is small, just enough to provide shade from the sun and protection from rain for a few people at a time, but it is vital. Without it, the crew would be exposed to the full force of the tropical sun all day, every day, and they would quickly become burned and exhausted. The edges of the platform are lined with rails, sturdy poles lashed horizontally between vertical posts, creating a fence that keeps people and cargo from sliding off the deck when the canoe heels. Lines are tied to these rails, coils of rope that can be used for securing cargo, for safety lines, for adjusting the sail, for a dozen other purposes. Everything on a voyaging canoe has multiple uses, and every piece of rope, every bit of wood, is precious and cannot be wasted. Rising from the center of the deck are the 2 masts. These are tall poles of flexible wood, carefully selected for their straightness and strength. The wood must be flexible enough to bend with the wind without snapping, but strong enough to support the weight and strain of the sail. The masts are stepped into sockets carved into the crossbeams, and they are held in place by stays, lines of senet, that run from the top of the mast down to various points on the deck and the hulls, spreading the load and preventing the mast from being pushed over by the pressure of the wind. The rigging of the stays is an art in itself, each line carefully positioned and tensioned so that the mast is held firmly but can still flex and move as the canoe works through the waves. The sails are woven from pandanus leaf, and their construction takes weeks of painstaking work. The pandanus leaves must be harvested at the right time when they are mature but not too old, and they must be dried and prepared properly. The dried leaves are then split into narrow strips, and these strips are plaited together, woven in an over-under pattern that creates a tight, strong mat. Hundreds of strips are needed for a single sail, and the weaving must be even and consistent. Every strip pulled to the same tension, every crossing pattern identical. The finished sail is a marvel, surprisingly light and flexible but incredibly strong, able to withstand the force of the wind without tearing. The sails are shaped like crab claws, a distinctive Polynesian design. Each sail consists of two triangular sections joined at the top, with the point of the triangle at the top of the mast and the base spread wide at the bottom. This shape allows the sail to be adjusted to catch the wind from almost any angle, not just from directly behind. By changing the angle of the sail relative to the canoe, the crew can sail downwind, which is easy, or at an angle to the wind, which is much harder but allows for much more flexibility in choosing a route. The crab claw sail is one of the key innovations that made Polynesian navigation possible, because it allowed canoes to sail not just with the trade winds but also across them and even partly against them. The steering is done with a large paddle at the stern of one hull. This is not a small paddle like you would use in a lagoon. It is a massive oar, 10 feet long, with a broad blade at the end. The steering paddle is held in place by the helmsman, who stands or sits at the stern, bracing the shaft of the paddle against his hip or shoulder, using his entire body weight to lever it back and forth. The blade acts as a rudder, and by angling it left or right, the helmsman can turn the canoe. But unlike a fixed rudder on a European ship, the steering paddle is held by hand, and the helmsman must constantly adjust it, compensating for the push of the waves, the pull of the current, the shifting force of the wind. It is exhausting work, requiring strength and concentration, and the helmsman must be relieved every few hours or he will collapse from fatigue. The canoe also carries paddles for the crew, long heavy paddles that can be used to propel the canoe when the wind fails. These are stored along the rails, lashed in place but ready to be grabbed and used at a moment's notice. Each paddle is carefully balanced, the blade shaped to bite into the water efficiently, the shaft long enough to give leverage, but not so long as to be unwieldy. Like everything else on the canoe, the paddles are works of craftsmanship, shaped and polished and cherished. Loading the canoe is a task that takes days, and it requires as much care and knowledge as building the canoe itself. Every item must be carefully considered, carefully packed, carefully positioned for balance and access. There is no room for waste, no room for anything that does not serve a purpose. The canoe can carry perhaps 3 tons of cargo, but that must include everything needed to keep 20 or 30 people alive for weeks or even months at sea, plus the supplies needed to establish a settlement if you are sailing to colonize a new island. The decisions about what to bring and what to leave behind are matters of life and death. The most important cargo is water, and managing the water supply is the primary constraint on any voyage. A human being needs at least 2 liters of water per day to survive, more in the heat and with the physical exertion of sailing. For a crew of 25 people on a voyage of 30 days, that is 1,500 liters of water, which weighs 1.5 tons. Half your cargo capacity is water. And if you run out, you die. There is no other option. You cannot drink seawater. You cannot wait for rain because rain in the tropical Pacific is unpredictable, and you may go weeks without seeing a drop. The water is stored in sealed gourds and bamboo containers, each one carefully prepared and tested to ensure it does not leak. The gourds are large, some of them holding 20 or 30 liters, and they are sealed with wooden stoppers wrapped in bark cloth and coated with breadfruit sap. The bamboo containers are sections of large bamboo capped at both ends, also sealed with sap. Each container is checked and rechecked, filled with water and left to sit for days to make sure the seal holds, because a leaking water container at sea is a catastrophe. The water containers are packed carefully in the shade of the shelter, wrapped in mats to protect them from the sun and from being knocked and broken. They are positioned low in the hulls, down near the waterline, because water is heavy and you want the weight low to keep the center of gravity down and improve stability. The containers are also distributed evenly between the 2 hulls to keep the balance, because if one hull is heavier than the other, the canoe will not sail straight. The water ration for the voyage is calculated carefully by the navigator and the senior crew members. They know how much water they have, how many people are going, how long the voyage is expected to last, and they divide it out to determine the daily ration. Typically, on a long voyage, each person will receive perhaps half a liter in the morning and half a liter in the evening, a total of 1 liter per day. This is barely enough to survive. It is not enough to be comfortable, not enough to avoid thirst. You will be thirsty all the time, but it is enough to keep you alive, and it allows for a margin of safety in case the voyage takes longer than expected. Next comes food. and the choices here are constrained by the need for preservation. You cannot take fresh meat. It will spoil in the heat within days, rotting and becoming inedible and dangerous. You cannot take most fresh vegetables. They will wilt and decay. What you can take is dried food, fermented food, preserved food, things that will last for weeks or months without refrigeration. The foundation of the diet at sea is dried fish. The fish are caught and filleted, and the fillets are pounded flat and salted and laid out in the sun to dry. The sun and the salt draw out the moisture, preserving the fish. When fully dried, the fish is hard and leathery, almost like wood, but it is nourishing and it will last for months. Dozens of pounds of dried fish are prepared for the voyage, wrapped in leaves and packed in baskets. Another staple is fermented breadfruit paste. Breadfruit is one of the most important crops on the islands. A large starchy fruit that grows on trees and can be harvested year-round. Fresh breadfruit is delicious, with a texture like potato and a slightly sweet flavor, but it cannot be taken on a voyage because it spoils quickly. Instead, it is preserved by fermentation. Ripe breadfruit is peeled and cored and mashed into a paste, and the paste is placed in pits lined with leaves and covered over. The paste ferments, developing a sour, tangy flavor, and in this fermented state it will last for many months. When it is needed, it is dug up, wrapped in banana leaves and packed in the canoe. At sea, you eat it mixed with a little water, and while it is not particularly pleasant, it is filling and nutritious. Dried taro cakes are another option. Taro root is cooked and pounded into a paste, and then spread out in thin layers and dried in the sun until it becomes hard and crisp. These cakes can be eaten dry or soaked in water to reconstitute them. They are bland but nourishing, providing carbohydrates and some vitamins. Coconuts are essential. Dozens of them are loaded onto the canoe, stacked carefully in nets. Coconuts provide not only food, but also water. A young coconut, a green one that has not yet matured, contains sweet water inside, perhaps a liter or more. This water is precious because it is one of the few things you can drink besides your rationed fresh water. The meat of the coconut can be eaten, either fresh or dried and grated, and it provides fat and protein. Coconut is also versatile, used for making cordage, for thatching, for 100 other purposes, and so coconuts are always prioritized in the cargo. Live animals are also taken, though this adds complexity. Small pigs in woven cages, chickens in bamboo coops. These animals are food that will stay fresh as long as they are alive, though they must be fed and watered, which adds to the strain on resources. The decision to take live animals is always a balance. They provide fresh meat, which is a huge morale boost and a source of vital protein, but they consume resources and take up space. On a long voyage to settle a new island, they are essential because they are breeding stock that will be needed to establish a population on the new land. You also take plants. This is critical if you are sailing to colonize. The plants you take are the foundation of future survival. Cuttings and roots and seedlings of taro, carefully wrapped in damp bark cloth to keep them moist. Banana suckers, the small shoots that grow from the base of a banana plant, which can be transplanted and will grow into new plants. Coconut seedlings, young coconuts that have sprouted, ready to be planted. Breadfruit cuttings, sugarcane, sweet potato slips. All of these are packed carefully in baskets, kept moist, protected from the salt spray, because if they die, you will arrive at the new island with no way to grow food. You take tools, and these are precious beyond measure. Stone adzes for cutting and shaping wood, each one a work of art. The stone blade carefully ground and polished and hafted to a wooden handle with senet lashing. Fish hooks of bone and shell, each one carved by hand, each one slightly different in shape and size for catching different kinds of fish. Nets woven from fiber, rolled up carefully and packed in waterproof wrapping. Cordage and senet, coils and coils of strong rope that can be used to repair the rigging, to lash down cargo, to catch a sea turtle, to build shelter on the new island. You take fire, and this is one of the most critical items. Fire is hard to make at sea. Your fire-making kit, the drill and the board and the tinder, can be used if you are on land or in very calm conditions. But at sea, with the canoe rocking and the wind blowing and everything damp with spray, it is nearly impossible, so you carry fire with you. It is kept in a coconut shell filled with smoldering coconut husk, the husk that remains after the fibers have been stripped away. This husk burns slowly, like charcoal, and it can be kept smoldering for days or even weeks if it is tended carefully. Someone is always responsible for the fire, checking it, feeding it a little fresh husk when needed, protecting it from rain. If the fire goes out, you will have to eat your food raw and shiver through the cold nights when the wind blows and your clothes are wet with spray. Losing the fire is a serious setback, and it is to be avoided at all costs. And you take the sacred things because this is not just a physical journey but a spiritual one. A small carved figure of the god who protects voyagers, wrapped in bark cloth and placed in a place of honor on the deck where it can be seen and where offerings can be made. A stone from the temple on your home island, a piece of your homeland that will accompany you on your journey and that will be placed in the temple of the new island when you arrive. A bundle of spears not for hunting or fighting, though they could be used for that, but as symbols of authority and power, to be planted in the soil of the new land when you arrive, claiming it in the name of your chief and your ancestors. The packing of all this cargo is an art. The heaviest items go low in the hulls, the lighter items on top. Items that will be needed frequently are packed where they can be easily accessed. Water containers are distributed evenly for balance. Food baskets are secured so they will not shift when the canoe heels. The plants are positioned where they will get some sun but not too much, where they will be sheltered from spray but not so buried that they cannot be checked and watered. Everything is lashed down, tied securely with multiple redundant lashings, because if cargo shifts in rough seas it can throw off the balance of the canoe and make it difficult or dangerous to sail. The loading takes days, and it is supervised constantly by the navigator and the senior crew members. They check every item, every lashing, making sure everything is correct. There are no second chances. Once you leave the island, you cannot come back for something you forgot. What you have on the canoe is all you have, and it must be sufficient to carry you across the ocean and establish a new life on a distant shore. The night before departure, there is a ceremony, and it is one of the most important events in the life of the island. The entire village gathers on the beach as the sun sets, and fires are lit, casting dancing shadows on the sand. The canoe sits in the shallows, rocking gently with the small waves, ready to go but held back by ropes tied to stakes driven deep into the sand. It looks different now that it is loaded, sitting lower in the water, the deck crowded with cargo, but it also looks purposeful, alive, eager to begin its journey. The ceremony begins with the priest, the spiritual leader of the village, walking around the canoe in a slow, deliberate circuit. He chants in the ancient language, the sacred tongue that is used only for religious rituals, words that reach back through generations to the first voyagers. He carries a bowl made from polished coconut shell, filled with water mixed with turmeric, the bright yellow dye made from the root of a plant. The turmeric water is sacred, purifying, and the priest dips his hand into it and sprinkles it over the canoe, over the hulls and the deck and the masts and the sail. He sprinkles it over the crew members as they stand in a line, their heads bowed, and each drop that falls on them is a blessing, a prayer for their safety. The chant is long and complex, listing the names of the ancestors who were navigators, calling on them to watch over this voyage. The priest recites their deeds, the islands they discovered, the storms they survived, the knowledge they passed down. He speaks the names of the gods who rule the ocean, asking for their favor, promising offerings and devotion in return for safe passage. The chant rises and falls, the rhythm hypnotic, and the crowd listens in silence, swaying slightly, caught up in the power of the words. After the priest, the navigator speaks. He steps forward, his face serious, and addresses the crew and the assembled village. He tells them the route he plans to follow, naming the stars he will steer by, describing the signs he will watch for. He explains that they will sail west for 10 days, following the trade winds, and then turn north, steering by Hokulea, until they reach the island chain that is their destination. He describes the island, though he has never seen it himself, describing it from the chants and the stories passed down, from the knowledge of earlier voyagers who went there generations ago. He tells them it is a high island, with mountains and forests and streams, and that there is a good harbor on the southern coast where they can land. He reminds the crew that the journey will be hard, that there will be days of thirst and hunger, days when the wind does not blow and they must paddle until their arms are numb, days when the wind blows too hard and they must take down the sails and ride out the storm. He tells them that some voyages fail, that some canoes are lost, swallowed by the ocean, or driven onto reefs in the night. But he also tells them that the gods are with them, that the ancestors are watching, and that if they are brave and skilled and faithful, they will reach their destination. He speaks with calm confidence, and his confidence is reassuring. He is the rock that the crew will cling to in the days ahead, the one who knows the way, the one who will bring them safely across the ocean. The chief of the island speaks next. He is an old man, the leader of the village, the descendant of the chiefs who ruled here for generations. He talks about the purpose of the voyage, about the need to find new land for the growing population, about the duty to continue the tradition of exploration and settlement. He talks about the bravery of the crew, the honor they bring to their families and to the village. He gives gifts to the navigator and to the captain of the canoe, ceremonial gifts of woven mats and carved weapons, tokens of respect and gratitude. And then the families come forward, one by one, to say goodbye to their sons and brothers and husbands who are leaving. There are tears, quiet weeping, embraces that linger. Some of these goodbyes may be final. Not everyone who leaves on a voyage returns. The ocean is vast and dangerous, and even the best navigators, even the strongest canoes can be lost. The families know this, and their grief is mixed with pride and hope. They give small gifts, pieces of shell jewelry, braided hair, things to remember them by, things to bring back if the gods allow. You stand with the other crew members and your own family comes to you. Your mother presses her nose to yours in the traditional greeting, and you can feel her trembling. She does not want you to go, but she is proud that you have been chosen, proud that you are following in the tradition of your grandfather. Your younger siblings crowd around, touching you, as if trying to memorize the feel of you. Your grandfather, the old navigator who taught you, places his hand on your shoulder and looks into your eyes. He says nothing, but his gaze is intense, and you understand. He is passing on the responsibility, the weight of the knowledge he has given you, and he is telling you to be worthy of it, to honor it, to come back safely and continue the tradition. The ceremony continues late into the night. There is food, a feast prepared for the crew, the last full meal they will have on land. Roasted pig and baked fish and taro and breadfruit, coconut cream and bananas and sugarcane. The crew eats until they are uncomfortably full, knowing it will be their last proper meal for a long time. There is also kava, the ceremonial drink made from the root of a plant, pounded and mixed with water. Kava has a mild sedative effect, and drinking it is a ritual, a way of communing with the ancestors and the gods. The bowl is passed from person to person, and each person drinks and then claps their hands in the traditional pattern, showing respect. As the night wears on, the mood shifts from solemn to celebratory. There is dancing, traditional dances performed by groups of young men and women, their bodies moving in unison, their feet stamping the sand in rhythm. The dances tell stories, stories of voyaging and discovery, of gods and heroes, and the crew watches, drawing strength and inspiration from the performance. There is singing, the old songs that everyone knows, songs about the ocean and the stars and the islands. The voices rise and blend, creating harmonies that float out over the dark water, and for a moment, the boundary between the living and the dead, between the present and the past, seems to dissolve. You are not just one person, one crew member about to embark on a voyage. You are part of something larger, part of a tradition that stretches back through time, part of a people who have always voyaged, who have always looked to the horizon and wondered what lies beyond. Finally, as the night begins to fade and the first hint of dawn lightens the eastern sky, the ceremony comes to an end. The priest performs a final blessing, and the navigator gives the order to prepare for departure. The crew boards the canoe, stepping carefully onto the deck, finding their places. The cargo is checked one last time, the lashings inspected. The ropes that hold the canoe to the shore are untied, coiled and stowed. The paddlers take their positions along the sides of the hulls, long heavy paddles in hand. The navigator stands at the stern, his hand on the steering paddle, his eyes on the gap in the reef where the ocean waits. The first light of dawn breaks over the horizon, and the beach is silent now except for the soft crash of waves. The crowd watches, gathered at the water's edge, their faces lit by the growing light. The navigator raises his hand, and the paddlers dip their blades into the water and begin to stroke, pulling in unison, the rhythm steady and strong. The canoe begins to move, sliding through the calm water of the lagoon, gaining speed. You feel the motion beneath your feet, the surge as each stroke propels the canoe forward, and your heart pounds in your chest. This is it. You are leaving. The island, the only home you have ever known, is falling away behind you, and ahead is the vast unknown expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The canoe approaches the gap in the reef, the narrow passage where the coral gives way and the deep water of the ocean flows through. The gap is marked by standing waves where the incoming swells surge through the narrow opening, and the paddlers must time their approach carefully, waiting for a lull between the larger waves. The navigator watches, waits, and then gives the signal. The paddlers stroke hard, driving the canoe forward, and you shoot through the gap with a rush of speed and a surge of spray, and suddenly you are through, and the reef is behind you, and the motion changes. Out here beyond the reef, the swells are larger, rolling in from the open ocean, and the canoe begins to pitch and heave, rising up the face of each swell, and sliding down the backside with a motion that is both exhilarating and slightly unsettling. The water is a deep dark blue, and it is moving, the surface covered with foam and chop, the wind kicking up small waves that slap against the hulls. The paddlers keep stroking, driving the canoe out through the surf line where the swells are starting to break, foam exploding into the air, and then you are clear, and the reef is a white line behind you, and there is nothing ahead but the open sea. The navigator gives the order, and the paddlers ship their paddles, pulling them in and stowing them along the rails. It is time to raise the sail. The crew moves quickly, working together with practiced efficiency. The sails, which have been furled and lashed to the deck, are untied and lifted. They are heavy and awkward to handle, and it takes 4 or 5 men to each sail, hauling on the lines, pulling the woven mat up the mast. The sail catches the wind even before it is all the way up, bellying out with a snap and a thrum, and the canoe heels slightly, leaning to the pressure. The crew keeps hauling, getting the sail all the way to the top of the mast, and then they belay the lines, securing them to cleats on the deck. The second sail goes up the same way, and now both sails are flying, filled with the steady trade wind that blows from the east. The effect is immediate and dramatic. The canoe, which was moving slowly under paddle power, suddenly surges forward, the hulls cutting through the water with a hiss and a rush, spray flying up from the bows. The paddlers sit back, breathing hard, and grin at each other. This is what a voyaging canoe is built for. This is the moment when it comes alive. The wind is steady, perhaps 15 knots, and the canoe is sailing fast, probably 5 or 6 knots, and the motion is smooth and purposeful. The navigator adjusts the steering paddle, finding the right angle to keep the canoe on course, and the crew settles in, adjusting to the new motion, finding comfortable positions on the deck. You look back one last time. The island is still visible, the green mountains rising from the sea, the white line of the reef, the thin column of smoke from the fires on the beach where the village still stands watching. But even as you look, the island seems to shrink, to recede, to become smaller and less distinct. The curve of the earth is pulling it down below the horizon, and within an hour or two it will be gone completely. You will be alone on the ocean, with no land in sight, no reference points, except the sun and the stars, and the endless blue water stretching away in every direction. It is a strange feeling, this moment of leaving the known world behind. There is fear, certainly, a tightness in your chest, and a flutter in your stomach. But there is also excitement, anticipation, a sense of adventure. You are doing what your ancestors have done for generations. You are voyaging, exploring, pushing out into the unknown, and you are not alone. You have the canoe, solid and strong beneath your feet. You have the crew, your companions on this journey, and you have the navigator, the master who knows the way. As long as you stay together, as long as you trust each other, and trust the traditions you have learned, you will be all right. The sun climbs higher in the sky, and the day grows hot. The island disappears below the horizon, and now there is nothing around you but water and sky. The journey has truly begun. The first day at sea is a strange and intense experience, and it marks the beginning of a profound transformation in how you perceive the world. The motion of the canoe is constant, a complex rhythm of rising and falling, rolling and pitching, that never stops, never pauses, not even for a moment. The canoe climbs up the face of a swell, pauses at the crest where you can see farther, and then slides down the backside into the trough, and then immediately begins to climb the next swell. This pattern repeats endlessly, sometimes smooth and regular, sometimes choppy and irregular when the wind kicks up local waves that interfere with the long swells. At first, the motion makes you queasy. Your inner ear, accustomed to the solid stability of land, is confused by the constant movement, and your stomach rebels. You feel a cold sweat on your forehead, a tightness in your throat, and a growing sensation of nausea that is hard to ignore. You lean over the side of the canoe and vomit into the sea, and you are not the only one. Several of the younger crew members are also feeling sick, their faces pale and green, and they too are leaning over the rail, retching. The older hands, the men who have made this voyage before, laugh at this, not unkindly, and tell you it will pass. Every voyager experiences seasickness on their first day, they say. It is a rite of passage. Your body needs time to adjust to the motion, and it will, usually within a day or two. And they are right. By the afternoon of the first day, the nausea begins to fade. Your body is learning to anticipate the motion, to roll with it rather than fight it, and the queasiness gradually subsides. You still feel the motion, still feel every rise and fall of the canoe, but it no longer makes you sick. Instead, it becomes background, a constant sensation that you adjust to, and by the evening of the first day you begin to feel almost normal, though the constant movement still takes getting used to. The work begins immediately, and there is always something to do on a voyaging canoe. Nothing can be left to chance. Everything must be checked, adjusted, maintained. The sails must be trimmed constantly as the wind shifts, as the angle of the canoe changes relative to the wind direction. The lines that control the sails must be hauled tighter or eased off, the angle of the sail changed to catch the wind most efficiently. This is not a task you do once and then forget. The wind is always changing, gusting and lulling, shifting direction slightly, and the sail must be adjusted to match. A poorly trimmed sail is inefficient, wasting wind, slowing the canoe, and on a voyage where time and distance matter, every bit of speed counts. The helmsman steers, standing or sitting at the stern with the great steering paddle braced against his hip or shoulder. He watches the horizon, watching the angle of the canoe relative to the direction he wants to go. During the day, he can use the sun as a reference, noting its position and adjusting the course to maintain the correct angle. At night, he uses the stars, steering toward the rising point of particular stars, adjusting as they climb higher. But the steering is not just about direction. The helmsman must also watch the waves, anticipating the larger swells, adjusting the angle slightly to take them at the best angle, preventing the canoe from being broadsided or having its bow driven under by a particularly large wave. It is demanding work, requiring constant attention and physical effort, and the helmsman must be relieved every 2 or 3 hours or he will collapse from exhaustion. The rigging must be checked constantly. The lashings that hold the masts in place, the stays that support them, the crossbeams that hold the two hulls together, all of these must be inspected regularly for any sign of wear or loosening. Senet, the coconut fiber cordage, is strong, but it is not immune to the constant stresses of sailing. The rocking and flexing of the canoe, the vibration from the wind in the sails, the salt water that soaks everything, all of these gradually weaken the lashings. A lashing that comes loose can lead to catastrophic failure, a mast toppling, a crossbeam breaking free, and so the crew walks around the canoe multiple times each day, tugging on lines, checking knots, tightening anything that has loosened, replacing anything that shows signs of chafing or fraying. Water and food must be distributed, and this is done according to a strict ration established by the navigator. Twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, the crew lines up and each person receives their allotted portion. The water ration is perhaps half a liter each time, a small gourd filled to a particular mark, and you drink it slowly, savoring each sip, trying to make it last. The food ration is equally modest, a small piece of dried fish, a handful of fermented breadfruit paste, perhaps a section of dried taro cake. It is not much, just enough to stave off hunger, to keep your strength up, but not enough to make you feel full or satisfied. Hunger becomes a constant companion, a low-level ache that you learn to live with. And there are other tasks too. The bilges must be checked and bailed. The canoe, despite the careful caulking of the seams, is not perfectly watertight. Water seeps in slowly through small gaps, and it collects in the bottom of the hulls. If it is not bailed out regularly, it will accumulate, adding weight and affecting the balance and performance of the canoe. So several times a day, someone climbs down into each hull with a bailer, a coconut shell cup, and scoops out the water, dumping it over the side. It is tedious, uncomfortable work, crouching in the dark, cramped space of the hull, but it is necessary. Fishing is an ongoing activity. both for food and for morale. Several lines are kept trailing behind the canoe at all times, baited with lures made from shell or bone shape to look like small fish. The lures skip and dance on the surface of the water as the canoe moves, and with luck, a tuna or a mahi-mahi will strike. When a fish is hooked, the crew hauls it in hand over hand, fighting the weight and strength of the fish as it tries to dive and escape. The moment when the fish is finally pulled over the rail and onto the deck is always a moment of celebration. Fresh fish is a rare treat, a break from the monotony of dried and preserved food, and it provides not just nutrition but a boost to morale that is invaluable on a long voyage. The crew takes turns standing watch, scanning the horizon for any sign of land or danger. During the day, the watch looks for changes in the color of the water, for birds, for clouds that might indicate land. At night, the watch keeps an eye on the stars, making sure the helmsman is maintaining the correct course, and also watches for any sign of bad weather, for changes in the wind or the appearance of clouds that might presage a storm. The watch also looks out for other hazards, floating logs or debris that could damage the hull if struck, or the shadowy shapes of large sea creatures, whales or sharks, that sometimes approach the canoe out of curiosity. You are assigned to work with one of the experienced sailors, a man named Kama who has made this voyage twice before. He becomes your mentor, your teacher, and he shows you the 1,000 small skills that are needed to survive at sea. He shows you how to trim the sail by feel, by sensing the pressure of the wind and the way the canoe responds, making tiny adjustments to get the maximum speed without overloading the hull and causing it to heel too far. He shows you the proper way to coil a line so that it will not tangle when it is needed quickly. He shows you how to lash a knot that will hold under stress but can be undone easily when needed. He shows you how to read the color of the water to spot schools of fish below, how to watch for the ripples and splashes that indicate dolphins or tuna feeding at the surface. Kama's is patient but demanding. He expects you to learn quickly, to remember what you are taught, to not make the same mistake twice. When you do something wrong, he corrects you firmly, but without anger. When you do something right, he nods in approval, and that nod is worth more than any elaborate praise. You watch him constantly, studying the way he moves, the way he works, the way he anticipates problems before they occur. He has an easy, confident competence, and you aspire to be like him, to earn the respect of the crew through your skills and your reliability. The sun moves across the sky, and the heat builds. By midday, the deck is burning hot, and there is no shade except under the small shelter in the middle of the platform. The crew takes turns resting there, lying in the relative cool, but it is crowded and stuffy, and you find yourself preferring to sit on the edge of the deck with your feet dangling in the water, letting the spray from the bow cool your skin. The salt crusts on your skin and hair, making everything sticky and uncomfortable, but there is no fresh water to spare for washing. As the sun begins to set, the wind eases slightly, and the motion of the canoe becomes gentler. The navigator comes forward and begins to point out the stars as they appear in the darkening sky. He names them, one by one, and tells you which direction they mark. He shows you Hokulia, the bright star rising in the east, and tells you that as long as that star is ahead of you, you are sailing north. He shows you the Southern Cross, low on the horizon behind you, and tells you that it marks the direction of home. He traces the path of the Milky Way, the great river of stars that arcs across the sky, and tells you that it too is a guide, its angle changing with the latitude, telling you how far north or south you are. Night falls completely, and the stars blaze overhead in a sky so clear and so dark that it seems to go on forever. The ocean becomes a black mirror, reflecting the stars, and it is hard to tell where the sea ends and the sky begins. The only sounds are the rush of the water against the hulls, the creak of the rigging, and the soft murmur of voices as the crew talks quietly among themselves. You lie on your back on the deck, looking up, and feel a sense of smallness and wonder that is almost overwhelming. You are a tiny speck of life in the middle of the largest ocean on Earth, surrounded by water and sky and stars, and yet you do not feel lost or afraid. The navigator knows where you are going, the stars are your map, the ancestors are watching. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. The days at sea blend into one another, a rhythm of work and rest, of sun and stars, of wind and water. You learn the routine of the canoe, the way the crew works together, each person with their own task, their own place in the hierarchy. The navigator is the leader, the one who makes all the important decisions, but he does not do so alone. He consults with the senior sailors, the men who have experience and wisdom, and he listens to the voices of the canoe, the sounds and motions that tell him how the vessel is performing. You learn to steer. This is harder than it looks. The steering paddle is heavy, and the force of the water against it is strong. You must brace it against your hip and use your whole body to lever it back and forth, making small adjustments to keep the canoe on course. The course is not a straight line. The wind is rarely directly behind you, and so you must sail at an angle, zigzagging back and forth across the desired direction, a technique called tacking. The navigator tells you what angle to maintain, and you do your best to hold it, watching the stars at night and the sun during the day, feeling the pressure of the wind on your face, listening to the hiss of the water along the hull. You learn to manage the sail. This is a constant task because the wind is never steady. It gusts and lulls, shifts direction slightly, and the sail must be adjusted to match. If the wind is light, you let the sail out, angling it almost perpendicular to the canoe to catch as much wind as possible. If the wind is strong, you pull the sail in tight, reducing the area exposed to the wind to prevent the canoe from heeling over too far. In very strong winds, you may have to take the sail down entirely and ride out the weather under bare poles, letting the canoe drift with the waves. You learn to fish. This is one of the most important tasks because fresh fish supplements the monotonous diet of dried food and provides a morale boost to the crew. Fishing from a moving canoe is an art. You cannot stop to cast a line. Instead, you trail a line behind the canoe, baited with a lure made from shell or bone shaped to look like a small fish. The lure skips and dances on the surface of the water, and if you are lucky, a tuna or a mahi-mahi will strike it, and you will feel the sudden jerk on the line. Then you haul it in, hand over hand, fighting the weight of the fish as it tries to dive, until you can grab it and pull it over the side. The fish is killed quickly and efficiently, its blood drained and its flesh cut into strips that are eaten raw or lightly grilled over the small fire that is kept burning in a sand-filled box on the deck. You learn to sleep on the canoe. This is harder than you expected. The deck is hard and narrow, and there is no way to lie down comfortably for long periods. You learn to wedge yourself into a corner of the platform, braced against the rail, and sleep in short snatches, an hour or two at a time. The motion of the canoe rocks you like a cradle, and the sound of the water is soothing, but the discomfort of the hard wood and the constant dampness of your clothes makes deep sleep almost impossible. You wake often, disoriented, not sure if it is night or day, and lie there listening to the creak of the rigging and the breathing of the men around you. You learn to conserve water. This is perhaps the hardest lesson of all. You are thirsty all the time. The sun and the wind and the salt air suck the moisture from your body, and you crave water with an intensity that is almost painful. But the water supply is limited, and the ration is strict. Twice a day, morning and evening, you are given a small gourd of water, perhaps half a liter, and that is all. You learn to sip it slowly, to hold it in your mouth and let it soak into your tongue before swallowing, to make it last. You learn to chew on small pieces of dried fish to stimulate saliva. You learn to crack open a coconut and drink the sweet water inside, though even this must be rationed. Some of the crew, desperate with thirst, try to drink seawater, but this only makes things worse. The salt draws moisture from your body and leaves you more dehydrated than before. The days are long and hot and monotonous. The sun rises, climbs to its zenith and sets, and the canoe sails on, day after day, with no sign of land. The horizon is empty in every direction, just the endless rolling blue of the ocean and the vast dome of the sky. You begin to understand why the navigator's knowledge is so important. Without the stars, without the swells, without the birds and the clouds, you would be utterly lost. You would have no idea where you are, no idea which direction to sail. You would be adrift in the middle of the ocean, and you would die. But the navigator does know. You watch him constantly, studying his methods, trying to learn what he knows. He does not use instruments. He does not have a compass or a sextant or a chart. His tools are his eyes, his body, and his mind. He watches the stars with an intensity that borders on meditation, memorizing their positions, calculating the angle at which they rise and set. He lies in the bottom of the hull and feels the swells, the way they come from different directions, the way they interact and create complex patterns of motion. He watches the clouds, the color of the water, the behavior of the birds. He pieces together all of these clues like a puzzle, building a mental map of where the canoe is and where it is going. At night, he teaches. He calls you over and shows you the star compass, tracing the houses with his finger in the air, naming the stars in each house, telling you the stories associated with them. Some of the stars are gods, some are ancestors, some are navigation marks, pure and simple, known by the direction they rise and the season they are visible. He teaches you the names in the old language, the sacred language of the navigators, and he makes you repeat them over and over until you can recite them without hesitation. He teaches you about the swells. He explains that there are different types of swells, generated by different weather systems in different parts of the ocean. The long, regular swells that come from the southeast are generated by storms in the Southern Ocean, thousands of miles away. They march across the Pacific in endless ranks, and they are the most reliable navigation tool you have. As long as you can feel the direction of these swells, you can maintain your course even on cloudy nights when the stars are not visible. He shows you how to lie in the hull and let your body become a sensor, feeling the angle of the swells, the rhythm of the rise and fall. It is a skill that takes years to master, a kind of sixth sense that allows the navigator to steer in the dark, in the fog, in any weather. He teaches you about the birds. He points out the white terns that appear each evening, flying from the west, and explains that they are heading home to an island in that direction, an island that is perhaps a day's sail away. He shows you the frigate birds soaring high overhead and explains that they are following the canoe, hoping for scraps of fish, but also that they are a sign that land is not far off. He tells you to watch for changes in the number and behavior of birds, because these changes can tell you when you are approaching land long before you can see it. And he teaches you patience. The ocean, he says, cannot be hurried. The wind blows when it chooses to blow. The islands are where they are. You can only sail as fast as the wind allows, and you must trust that if you are steering correctly, if you are reading the signs correctly, you will arrive at your destination when the time is right. Impatience is the enemy of a navigator. It leads to mistakes, to taking risks that should not be taken. A good navigator is calm, patient, and confident. He trusts his knowledge, and he trusts the ocean. A week passes, then 10 days, then 2 weeks. The days blur together into a kind of seamless continuity. You fall into a kind of trance, a state of existence where time seems to lose its meaning. There is day and night, but they blend into each other, each one much like the last. The work, the heat, the thirst, the constant motion of the canoe, all of it becomes a background hum, and you drift through the hours in a daze, your mind turned inward, your body functioning on automatic. You stop thinking about the island you left behind. Those memories which were so vivid in the first days begin to fade, to feel distant and unreal. You stop thinking about the island you are sailing toward, because it too seems abstract, a theoretical destination that may or may not exist. You exist only in the present moment, in the feel of the deck beneath your feet, in the taste of salt on your lips, in the sound of the water rushing past the hull. The ocean becomes your entire world, and you cannot imagine any other. And then one morning, something changes. You wake from a shallow sleep just before dawn and lie there on the deck, listening to the sounds of the canoe and the sea. Something is different, though at first you cannot identify what it is, and then you realize it is too quiet. The sound of the wind in the rigging, the steady hum that has been a constant presence for days, is gone. The canoe is no longer heeling to the pressure of the wind. The motion has changed from the steady forward surge to a slow, sluggish rocking. You sit up and look around. The sails are hanging limp and empty, flapping loosely in the still air, no longer pulling. The wind has died during the night. The trade winds, which have been blowing steadily from the east for days, pushing you relentlessly westward, have simply stopped. The sky is clear, not a cloud anywhere, and the ocean is glassy, the surface smooth and unbroken, except for the long, slow swells that continue to roll through even without wind. This is called a calm, and it is one of the most frustrating and dangerous experiences at sea. Without wind, the canoe cannot sail. You are becalmed. The crew wakes, and there is a brief discussion. The navigator confers with the senior sailors, assessing the situation. How long will the calm last? No one knows. Sometimes a calm lasts only a few hours, until the morning sun heats the air and stirs up a breeze. Sometimes it lasts for days. There is no way to predict. The decision is made quickly. You will paddle. You cannot simply sit and wait. You are making no progress, and you are still many days from land. Every hour of drift is an hour wasted. and your water and food supplies are not unlimited. You must keep moving. The paddles are brought out from their storage along the rails, and the crew takes their positions. There are 8 paddlers on each hull, kneeling or standing along the sides facing forward, each with a long heavy paddle in their hands. You take a paddle and find a place to kneel, bracing your knees against the side of the hull, feeling the wood hard against your skin. The paddle is heavy, perhaps 10 pounds, and the shaft is worn smooth by years of use, countless hands gripping it in this same position. The navigator gives the signal, a sharp clap of his hands, and you begin to stroke. You dip the blade into the water and pull, using your whole body, your legs pushing, your back twisting, your arms pulling the paddle through the water. The blade bites into the water, and you feel the resistance, and you pull through it, and then you lift the blade out and swing it forward for the next stroke. Dip, pull, lift, swing, dip, pull, lift, swing. The rhythm is established, and the whole crew strokes in unison, 16 paddles dipping and pulling together. The canoe begins to move, slowly at first, barely making headway, but then with more speed, as the crew finds their pace and the canoe gains momentum. The motion is different from sailing, less smooth, more jerky, rising and falling with each stroke. But you are moving, and that is what matters. Paddling is exhausting work, far more exhausting than you expected. Within minutes, your shoulders are burning with the effort, your arms aching, your back is sore from the twisting motion. Sweat is pouring down your face and stinging your eyes. The sun comes up, and the heat builds rapidly, and there is no wind, no breeze to cool you. The air is still and heavy, and you are gasping for breath, your heart pounding, and you have only been paddling for perhaps 10 minutes. But you cannot stop. The crew must keep going, must maintain the rhythm, because if even one person stops, it throws off the timing for everyone else. You grit your teeth and keep paddling. Dip, pull, lift, swing. Your mind empties of everything except the motion, the rhythm. You stop thinking, stop feeling anything, except the burning in your muscles and the monotonous repetition of the stroke. After what feels like an eternity, but is probably only an hour, the navigator calls a halt. The crew collapses, dropping their paddles, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling with exhaustion.
You lie on the deck,
Your chest heaving, and stare up at the sky. Your arms feel like they are made of lead, too heavy to lift. Your hands are cramped from gripping the paddle, the fingers curled into claws that will not straighten. The canoe drifts, wallowing in the swells, and the crew rests. Water is passed around, and you take your ration and drink it in small sips, trying to make it last, but it is gone too quickly, and you are still desperately thirsty. The salt sweat has crusted on your skin, and your lips are cracked and painful. After perhaps an hour of rest, the navigator gives the signal to paddle again. There is a collective groan from the crew, but no one refuses. You pick up your paddle, heavy as a stone, and take your position, and the rhythm begins again. Dip, pull, lift, swing. The pain in your shoulders and back, which had eased slightly during the rest, returns immediately, worse than before. But you paddle, you have no choice. This pattern continues for 2 days. Paddle for an hour, maybe longer, until the crew is on the verge of collapse. Rest for an hour. Paddle again. The progress is agonizingly slow. The canoe creeps forward, making perhaps 2 or 3 miles per hour, covering maybe 20 or 30 miles in a full day of hard labor. It is nothing compared to the 100 or more miles you were making each day under sail, but it is better than drifting. The work is brutal, and the conditions are oppressive. The heat is relentless. The sun beating down from a cloudless sky, baking the deck until it is almost too hot to touch. There is no shade except under the small shelter, and that is crowded and airless. The water ration is reduced even further to conserve supplies, and the thirst becomes almost unbearable. Your tongue feels thick and swollen in your mouth, your throat raw. You dream of water constantly, of cool streams and waterfalls, and you wake to the reality of the endless blue ocean that you cannot drink. The lack of food and water begins to take a toll on the crew. People are becoming weak, their strength sapped by the heat and the effort and the deprivation. Tempers flare. Men who have been friends for years snap at each other over trivial things, their patience worn thin by the constant strain. There are arguments, accusations, and the navigator must intervene, calming people down, reminding them that they must work together, that turning on each other will only make things worse. The mood on the canoe is tense, fragile. and there is an undercurrent of fear that no one voices but everyone feels. What if the wind does not return? What if the calm continues for another week? The water supply is running low. If it runs out before the wind returns, before you reach land, then you will die. It is that simple. There is no rescue at sea, no one to help you. You are on your own, and your survival depends entirely on your own efforts and on the favor of the gods. On the evening of the second day of paddling, you sit on the deck in the gathering dusk, too exhausted to eat, too thirsty to sleep, and you pray. You pray to the gods of the ocean, to the ancestors who watch over voyagers, and you ask for the wind to return. You promise offerings, devotion, anything, if only the wind will blow again. Around you, other crew members are doing the same, their lips moving in silent prayer, their faces drawn and haggard. And then, on the morning of the third day, the wind returns. It starts as a faint breath, the tiniest stirring of the air, and you feel it on your skin, cool and miraculous. The surface of the water, which has been glassy and still, begins to ripple. The sails hanging limp begin to stir, to fill slightly. The breeze builds, growing stronger, and within an hour it is blowing steadily from the east. The trade wind restored, the normal order of the world returned. The sails are trimmed and tightened, and they fill with a snap, and the canoe surges forward, and the crew lets out a ragged cheer. The paddling is over. You are sailing again. The relief is almost overwhelming, and some of the crew are crying, tears of exhaustion and gratitude running down their faces. But the ordeal of the calm has taken a toll. The crew is weaker than before, the water supply is lower, and the mood is more somber. There is a sense that the voyage is reaching a critical point, that you are running out of time. If you do not find land soon, if another crisis occurs, the voyage may fail. No one says this out loud, but everyone is thinking it. The navigator seems unconcerned. He continues to watch the stars, to feel the swells, to scan the horizon for signs. He is confident, or at least he appears to be, and his confidence is reassuring. If he is worried, he does not show it. He is the rock that the crew clings to, the one who knows the way. Another week passes. The canoe sails on. The food supply is running low. The dried fish and breadfruit paste are almost gone, and the remaining coconuts are reserved for the water they contain. The crew is living on half rations, just enough to keep going. Hunger is a constant companion now, a hollow ache in your belly that never goes away. You dream of food, of roasted pig and baked taro and ripe bananas, and you wake to the reality of a small handful of dried fish and a sip of water. And then one evening, the navigator calls you over. He points to the horizon, to the west, where the sun has just set. The sky is turning orange and purple, the colors reflected in the calm sea, and there, low on the horizon, you see a cloud. It is a different kind of cloud, not the scattered puffs that drift across the sky, but a tall, solid mass, anvil-shaped, rising high into the air. The navigator smiles. That cloud, he says, is sitting over an island. We are close. The mood on the canoe changes instantly. The fatigue and the hunger are forgotten. The crew gathers on the deck, staring at the cloud, talking excitedly.
You are almost there.
After weeks at sea, after thirst and hunger and exhaustion, land is near. The navigator gives orders to adjust the course slightly, steering toward the cloud, and the canoe sails on through the night. The next morning the birds arrive. First just one or two white terns, flying from the west, but by midday they are everywhere, circling and calling, dozens of them. And then you see the frigate birds, soaring high overhead, more of them than you have seen at any time during the voyage. The navigator nods. We are very close now, he says. Watch the horizon. And then just before noon, someone shouts. There on the horizon, a dark line. At first you think it might be a cloud, but it does not move, does not change shape. As the canoe sails closer, the line becomes clearer, resolving into the shape of a mountain, a green peak rising from the sea. Land, you have found it. The sight of land after so long at sea is almost overwhelming. You feel a wave of emotion, a mixture of relief and joy and disbelief, and tears spring to your eyes. You are not the only one. All around you, the crew is reacting the same way, some laughing, some crying, some simply staring in silence. The navigator's face is calm, but you can see the satisfaction in his eyes. He has done it. He has brought the canoe across the ocean, steering by nothing but stars and swells and the flight of birds, and he has found the island he was looking for. The island is still far away, perhaps 10 or 15 miles, and it takes the rest of the day to reach it. As you get closer, the details become clearer. You can see the white line of the reef, the green of the forest, the shapes of coconut palms along the shore. You can see the lagoon, a protected area of calm turquoise water inside the reef, and beyond it, the mountains rising into the clouds. It is beautiful, a jewel in the blue expanse of the ocean, and it looks like paradise after the hardships of the voyage. The canoe approaches the reef cautiously. The navigator is looking for a gap, a passage through the coral where the canoe can enter the lagoon without being smashed by the waves. He finds one, a narrow channel where the water is deep and the waves are smaller, and he steers toward it. The crew takes down the sails and takes up the paddles, and you paddle slowly and carefully through the gap, the waves surging and boiling on either side, the coral visible just beneath the surface, sharp and dangerous. And then you are through, and the motion of the canoe changes instantly. The swells are gone, replaced by the gentle lapping of the lagoon, and the canoe glides across the smooth water toward the beach. As you approach the shore, you see people. They are standing on the beach, watching the canoe, and as you get closer, you can see that they are waving, calling out. This is not an uninhabited island. People live here. They are relatives, descendants of an earlier voyage, and they are welcoming you home. The canoe is paddled up onto the beach, and you step onto the sand, and your legs almost buckle. After so long at sea, the solid ground feels strange, unsteady, and you have to sit down for a moment until your body adjusts. The people of the island surround you, embracing you, pressing noses in the traditional greeting, asking questions in a language that is similar to your own but with a different accent. They bring food, fresh fruit and roasted fish and taro and water, cool and sweet, and you drink and eat until you feel sick, your stomach unused to so much food after weeks of rationing. The relief of being on land, of having fresh water and food, of being safe is almost overwhelming, and you sit on the beach and cry, unable to stop the tears. That night, there is a feast. The people of the island prepare a great meal in your honor, cooking pigs in an underground oven, roasting breadfruit, preparing dishes that you have not tasted in weeks. The navigator is treated as a guest of honor, seated next to the chief of the island, and there is much talking and storytelling, the two men exchanging news and genealogies and stories of the voyage. The crew is given a place to sleep in one of the village houses, and you lie down on a soft mat and fall into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first real sleep you have had in weeks. The next few days are spent resting and recovering. Your body is weak from the voyage, your skin burned and crusted with salt, your muscles sore. You bathe in fresh water, washing away the salt and the grime, and you eat and drink and sleep, and slowly your strength returns. The canoe is hauled up onto the beach and inspected. The rigging is checked, the lashings tightened, any damage repaired. The supplies are unloaded, and the people of the island marvel at the plants and animals you have brought, the taro cuttings and banana suckers, the piglets and chickens, gifts from your home island. After a week, the navigator announces that it is time to move on. This island is not your final destination. You are going farther, deeper into the unknown, looking for new land to settle. The canoe is reloaded with fresh supplies, and the people of the island give you gifts, food and water for the next leg of the journey, and they gather on the beach to see you off. The canoe is paddled back through the gap in the reef, and the sails are raised and you are at sea again, sailing into the blue. The second leg of the voyage is different from the first. You are rested, you are well fed, and you have the confidence of having completed one successful passage. But the ocean is the same, vast and empty and indifferent, and the challenges are the same. You must navigate, you must manage the canoe, you must conserve water and food, and you must hope that the navigator's knowledge will guide you to land before your supplies run out. The days pass, the sun rises and sets, the stars wheel overhead, the canoe sails on. You are sailing into an area of the ocean that is less well known, where the islands are farther apart, where the old navigation chants are less specific. The navigator is relying more on his instincts, on the general patterns of winds and currents, on the flight of birds and the color of clouds. He is exploring, pushing the boundaries of the known world, and there is an element of risk in this that was not present in the first leg of the voyage. One night, you wake to a change in the motion of the canoe. The wind has picked up, and the swells are larger, steeper, and the canoe is pitching and heaving in a way that is unsettling. You sit up and look around. The sky is dark, the stars hidden behind clouds, and the wind is gusting, the rigging humming with tension. The navigator is awake, standing at the stern, his hand on the steering paddle, and his face is grim. A storm is coming. The crew is roused, and preparations are made. The sail is taken down and lashed securely to the deck. Everything that can be tied down is tied down. The water gourds and food baskets are secured in the shelter. The crew huddles in the middle of the platform, holding on to the rails, and you wait. The storm hits, just before dawn. The wind comes first, a howling blast that tears across the water and sends spray flying. The swells grow larger, towering walls of water that lift the canoe high into the air and then drop it into the trough with a sickening lurch. The canoe twists and bucks, the hulls flexing and groaning under the strain, and water pours over the deck, drenching everyone. The helmsman fights to keep the canoe pointed into the waves. If the canoe is caught broadside, if a large wave hits from the side, it could be rolled over and capsized, and everyone would be thrown into the sea. The storm lasts for hours. You cling to the rail with both hands, your fingers white with the effort, and you pray to the gods to spare you. All around you, the crew is doing the same, chanting prayers and offerings, asking for protection. The navigator is still at the helm, his body braced against the steering paddle, his eyes on the waves, making small adjustments to keep the canoe aligned. He is drenched, his hair plastered to his head, but his face is calm, focused. He has been through storms before, and he knows what to do. And then, as quickly as it came, the storm begins to ease. The wind drops, the swells become smaller, and the sky lightens. The sun breaks through the clouds, and the ocean, which was a roiling chaos just moments ago, begins to settle into a more normal rhythm. The crew sits up, looking around, checking for damage. Miraculously, the canoe is intact. The lashings have held. Nothing has been lost. You have survived. But the storm has cost you. The canoe has been blown off course, and the navigator is not sure exactly where you are. The clouds are still thick, and he cannot see the stars to get a fix on your position. He must wait for the sky to clear, and then spend a night observing and recalculating. In the meantime, the canoe drifts, the crew resting and recovering from the ordeal. That night, the sky clears, and the navigator spends hours studying the stars. He makes his calculations, and in the morning, he announces that the storm has pushed you to the south, away from your intended course. You must sail north to get back on track. The sails are raised, and the canoe is turned, and you begin to sail north, tacking back and forth against the trade winds, making slow progress. Several more days pass. The food is running low again. The water is being rationed even more strictly. The crew is tired, the mood somber. And then one morning, the navigator points to a line of clouds on the horizon. They are low, greenish on the underside, and they do not move. He is confident. That is land. By midday, the island comes into view. It is small, a low coral atoll, a ring of sand and palm trees surrounding a lagoon. It is not a high island with mountains and rivers. It is a flat, fragile piece of land barely above sea level, but it is land, and it is uninhabited. This is your destination. This is the place where you will settle. The canoe enters the lagoon through a gap in the reef, and you paddle to the beach and step onto the sand. The island is beautiful in its simplicity. The sand is white and fine, the palms rustle in the breeze, and the lagoon is a brilliant turquoise, clear to the bottom. There are no people here, no sign that anyone has ever lived here before. You are the first. This is a virgin island, a blank slate, and it is yours. The work of settlement begins immediately. The first task is to find fresh water. On a coral atoll, there is no river, no stream. The only fresh water is rainwater, which seeps down through the sand and forms a lens of fresh water floating on top of the denser salt water below. You dig pits in the sand, shallow wells, and wait for the water to seep in. It is brackish, slightly salty, but it is drinkable, and it is enough. The second task is to build shelter. You cut down some of the smaller palms and lash them together into frames, which you cover with woven pandanus mats. The structures are simple, just roofs to keep off the sun and rain, but they are enough for now. You can improve them later. The third task is to plant. The taro cuttings and banana suckers and coconut seedlings that you brought with you are carefully planted in the richest soil you can find, near the center of the island where the sand is mixed with organic matter from decaying vegetation. You water them from the wells and pray that they will take root and grow. These plants are your future. If they die, you will have no food except what you can gather from the reef, and survival will be much harder. The days on the island fall into a new rhythm. You fish in the lagoon, catching parrotfish and surgeonfish and octopus. You gather coconuts and pandanus fruit. You work on improving the shelters, building proper houses with walls and floors raised off the ground. You explore the island, walking its entire circumference in a single morning, learning its features, its resources. It is a small world, but it is your world, and you begin to feel a sense of belonging, a connection to this place. The canoe is not abandoned. It is hauled up onto the beach and stored carefully, protected from the sun and rain. It will be needed again. In a few months or perhaps a year, some of the crew will sail back to the home island to report on the settlement, to bring news and request supplies, to maintain the connection between the old world and the new. The canoe is the lifeline, the link that keeps the scattered islands of your people connected across the vast ocean. Life on the atoll is hard but satisfying. You are part of something larger than yourself, part of a tradition of voyaging and settlement that stretches back for generations. You are building a new community in a new place, and you are doing it with your own hands, using the knowledge and skills passed down from your ancestors. The work is difficult, but it has meaning, and that meaning sustains you. At night you sit on the beach and look up at the stars, the same stars that guided you across the ocean, the same stars that your grandfather taught you to recognize. The same stars that navigators have used for 1,000 years. You think about the journey you have made, the miles of open ocean, the storms, the thirst, the fear, and the joy of arrival. You think about the people you left behind, and the people who will come after you, and you feel a sense of continuity, a sense of being part of a long chain of voyages stretching back into the mists of time. The navigator, before he left to return to the home island, taught you the final lessons. He showed you how to memorize the route, how to remember the stars you steered by, the direction of the swells, the signs that marked the way. He told you that one day, you might be called upon to make this voyage yourself, to bring others to this place, or to guide them to new islands even farther away. And when that day comes, you will be ready. You will have the knowledge, and you will have the courage, and you will honor the tradition of the navigators who came before you. The years pass. The settlement grows. More canoes arrive from the home island, bringing more people, more supplies, more plants and animals. The atoll is transformed from an empty sandbar into a thriving community. Houses are built, gardens are planted, children are born. The population grows, and the island becomes crowded, and some of the young people begin to look toward the horizon with the same restless curiosity that brought you here. You are older now, a man of experience and authority. You have become a navigator, trained by the master who brought you here, inheriting his knowledge and his responsibility. When a new canoe is built, when a new voyage is planned, you are the one who is consulted, the one who makes the decisions about where to go and when to leave. The tradition continues, passed from one generation to the next, and you are now a link in that chain. But something is changing. The voyages are becoming less frequent. The ocean is large, and the easy islands have been found. The new lands that are being discovered are farther away, smaller, harder to reach. Some voyages fail. Canoes leave and are never heard from again, lost to storms or thirst, or simply the vastness of the ocean. The knowledge of navigation is still passed down, but it is becoming less vital, less urgent. People are settling in, putting down roots, focusing on the land rather than the sea. And then, after centuries of expansion, the voyaging stops. The reasons are complex and not entirely understood. Perhaps all the habitable islands have been found. Perhaps the climate changed, making the voyages more dangerous. Perhaps the social and political structures that supported voyaging broke down. But for whatever reason, the great age of exploration comes to an end. The canoes are no longer built. The navigators grow old and die, and the knowledge they carry begins to fade. The islands become isolated, each one a separate world. The stories of the great voyages are still told, but they become legends, myths, tales of heroes and gods rather than practical instructions for how to sail from one island to another. The skills of navigation are forgotten. The star compass, the reading of the swells, the understanding of the wind and the birds, all of it slips away, preserved only in fragments, in old chants and half-remembered songs. Centuries pass. The islands remain inhabited, but the ocean, which was once a highway connecting them, becomes a barrier. The people of each island live in their own world, unaware that beyond the horizon there are other islands, other people, other descendants of the same great voyaging tradition. The unity of the Polynesian world is broken, and the memory of the voyagers fades into the realm of myth. And then, in the late 18th century, European explorers arrive. They are astonished to find the islands of the Pacific inhabited by people who speak similar languages, who share similar customs and beliefs. How did these people get here? The Europeans cannot imagine how anyone could have crossed such vast distances without the tools of European navigation, without compasses and charts and sextants. They assume the islanders must have arrived by accident, drifting on rafts or canoes blown off course by storms. The idea that the Polynesians deliberately explored and settled the Pacific, that they had their own sophisticated systems of navigation, is dismissed as impossible. The islanders themselves can no longer explain. The knowledge has been lost. They tell the Europeans the stories of the ancient voyages, but the stories are mixed with myth and legend, and the Europeans do not believe them. The great achievement of the Polynesian navigators is forgotten, dismissed, erased from history. But knowledge once learned is never entirely lost. It persists in fragments, in the memories of old men on remote islands, in the lines of ancient chants preserved by families who maintained the tradition, in the names of stars and the directions they mark scratched into the collective memory of a culture. And in the 20th century, as the colonial period began to wane and the peoples of the Pacific began to reclaim their cultural heritage, a remarkable thing happened. A small group of determined scholars, sailors, and islanders, refusing to accept that their heritage was forever lost, began to piece together the lost art of navigation, fragment by fragment, memory by memory. The process began with anthropologists and historians who traveled to the most remote islands of Micronesia, places like Satawal and Puluwat, where the tradition of navigation had survived in an unbroken but weakened form. There they found the last of the old navigators, elderly men who still remembered the star compass, who still knew how to read the swells, who still held in their minds the navigation chants that described routes between islands. These men had not made long voyages in decades. The colonial authorities had discouraged traditional voyaging, and the younger generation had largely abandoned the old ways in favor of European-style navigation and motorboats. But the knowledge was still there, dormant but not dead. One of these navigators was a man named Mal Pialog, from the tiny island of Satawal in Micronesia. Mal was a Palu, a master navigator, trained in the traditional way from childhood, and he possessed the complete knowledge system that had nearly disappeared elsewhere. He knew the star compass with all its houses and all the stars in each house. He could read the swells and identify their direction and source even in complex sea conditions. He understood the flight patterns of birds and the meaning of clouds and the color of the water. He carried in his mind the routes to dozens of islands, some of them hundreds of miles away, and he could recite the navigation chants that encoded this knowledge in poetry and song. In the 1970s, Mao was approached by members of the Polynesian Voyaging Society, a group based in Hawaii that was trying to prove that the ancient Polynesians could have deliberately navigated across the Pacific. The prevailing theory among Western scholars at the time was still that the settlement of the Pacific Islands was largely accidental, that people had drifted on rafts or had been blown off course by storms and had stumbled onto islands by luck. The idea that they had deliberately explored and navigated using sophisticated techniques was dismissed by many academics as impossible. The Polynesian Voyaging Society set out to prove them wrong. They built a replica of a traditional double-hulled voyaging canoe, using the best historical and archaeological evidence available. They studied the old accounts and drawings made by European explorers who had witnessed these canoes before they disappeared. They consulted with elders and historians across the Pacific. And they built a canoe 60 feet long, twin-hulled with woven sails and traditional lashings. They named it Hoklava, after the Hawaiian name for Arcturus, the star that guides voyagers to Hawaii. But having a traditional canoe was not enough. They needed someone who could actually navigate it using traditional methods, someone who still possessed the knowledge, and so they asked Malpealug if he would navigate the canoe on a voyage from Hawaii to Tahiti, a distance of 2,500 miles across open ocean, without any modern instruments, without compass or sextant or GPS, using only the stars and the swells and the signs of nature. Ma agreed. In 1976, Hoklose set sail from Hawaii with a mixed crew of Hawaiians and mainland sailors, and with Malpealug as navigator. The voyage was fraught with challenges. The crew was inexperienced, unused to the demands of a traditional voyaging canoe. There were tensions and disagreements. The weather was difficult, but Ma, the master navigator, guided them surely and steadily. He stood at the stern with the steering paddle, or he lay in the hull feeling the swells, or he sat on the deck at night, studying the stars, and he always knew where they were, always knew which direction to sail. After 33 days at sea, Hoklefa arrived at Tahiti, making landfall exactly where Mao said they would, on the island of Mataiva. It was a triumphant vindication of Polynesian navigation, proof that the ancient voyagers were not primitives drifting by accident, but skilled explorers who had deliberately and systematically settled the Pacific. The arrival was met with enormous celebration in Tahiti, with thousands of people gathering to welcome the canoe, and the news spread across the Pacific and around the world. The voyage of Hoklose sparked a cultural renaissance that is still continuing today. Islanders who had been told for generations that their ancestors were backward and primitive, who had been taught to be ashamed of their heritage, suddenly realized that they were the descendants of some of the greatest navigators in human history. The pride and the knowledge that had been suppressed and forgotten began to return. Interest in traditional culture surged. Young people began to learn the old language, to practice the old arts, to study the navigation techniques. Malpealug, the master navigator from Satawal, became a revered figure across the Pacific. He dedicated the rest of his life to passing on his knowledge, training a new generation of navigators. He taught Nainoa Thompson, a young Hawaiian who became the first Polynesian in modern times to learn the complete system of traditional navigation and to successfully navigate Hoklefa on subsequent voyages without Mole's direct guidance. And Nainoa in turn taught others, and the knowledge spread, radiating out from Hawaii to other island groups. More voyaging canoes were built. In New Zealand, the Mamuri built canoes and began to revive their own seafaring traditions. In Samoa, in Fiji, in the Cook Islands, in Tahiti, traditional canoes were constructed and crews were trained. These canoes began to make voyages between islands, re-establishing the ancient network of connections that had been broken. They participated in festivals and cultural events, sailed to gatherings where canoes from different island groups would meet and share knowledge and celebrate their common heritage. The revival is not just about boats and navigation, it is about identity, about reclaiming a heritage that was nearly lost, about asserting that the cultures of the Pacific have value and dignity and deserve to be preserved and celebrated. The voyaging canoes are symbols of this renaissance, floating ambassadors of a proud cultural tradition. They remind people that their ancestors were not passive victims of history but active agents, explorers and innovators who achieved something extraordinary. Today, if you visit Hawaii, you can see Hoklefa in port, a living piece of history. The canoe has now voyaged tens of thousands of miles, circling the Pacific, sailing to distant islands, training hundreds of students. It is maintained and sailed by the Polynesian Voyaging Society, which continues to promote traditional navigation and cultural education. Similar canoes can be seen in other island groups, each one a testament to the enduring strength of Pacific Islander culture. The revival has also sparked renewed interest in the archaeology and history of Pacific settlement. Scholars now work closely with navigators and cultural practitioners, combining archaeological evidence with traditional knowledge to understand how the ancient voyages were accomplished. They study the prevailing winds and currents, the seasonal patterns, the routes that would have been most feasible. They use computer models to simulate voyages and test hypotheses, and increasingly the evidence supports what the navigators have been saying all along, that the settlement of the Pacific was deliberate, planned and executed with extraordinary skill. The ancient navigators left no written records, no charts, no logs. They left only their descendants, scattered across thousands of miles of ocean, speaking related languages, sharing cultural practices, and telling similar stories. And they left the islands themselves, every one of them inhabited, from the largest to the smallest, from the wettest to the driest, evidence of human courage and ingenuity. The story of how this was done, how people in wooden canoes navigated across the largest ocean on Earth and successfully settled nearly every habitable island, is one of the great adventure stories of human history, and it is a story that is finally being told and celebrated as it deserves. The navigators of old are gone. Their world, the world of long voyages and constant exploration, has passed into history. But their legacy remains, encoded in the DNA of Pacific Islanders, preserved in the languages and the chants and the stories, and now alive again in the beautiful voyaging canoes that sail the Pacific waters, honoring the ancestors, and keeping the knowledge alive for future generations. The stars have not changed. The swells still roll across the ocean in their ancient patterns. The birds still fly their accustomed routes. The knowledge is there, waiting to be learned by anyone with the patience and dedication to master it. And in that knowledge is a connection to the past, a link to the ancestors, and a reminder of what humans can achieve when they combine courage with skill, when they trust in their knowledge and venture into the unknown. The story of the Polynesian Navigators is one of the greatest adventure stories in human history. It is a story of exploration and discovery, of skill and courage, of a deep understanding of the natural world. It is also a story of loss and rediscovery, of how knowledge can be forgotten and how it can be reclaimed. When you look up at the stars on a clear night, when you stand on a beach and feel the rhythm of the waves, you are seeing and feeling the same things that those ancient navigators saw and felt. The stars have not changed, the ocean has not changed, and the human spirit, the desire to explore, to discover, to push beyond the known world, that has not changed either. The Polynesians sailed across the Pacific in small wooden canoes, carrying everything they needed to start new lives on distant islands. They did this without any of the technology that we consider essential. They did it with knowledge and skill and courage, and they did it successfully for centuries. They were some of the greatest sailors and navigators in human history, and their achievement deserves to be remembered and celebrated. And so our voyage through the past comes to an end. We have sailed with the first Polynesian navigators, felt the wind in our hair and the salt spray on our faces, learned to read the stars and the swells and the flight of birds. We have experienced the thirst and the hunger and the fear of the open ocean, and we have known the joy of sighting land after weeks at sea. We have seen how a small group of people, with nothing but wooden canoes and their own ingenuity, explored and settled the largest ocean on Earth. The world of the ancient voyagers is gone. The great fleets no longer sail. The navigators no longer memorize the star compass and teach it to their children. But the legacy remains. It remains in the islands themselves, in the people who live there, in the stories and songs and dances that have been passed down through the generations. It remains in the modern voyaging canoes that sail the Pacific today, honoring the ancestors and keeping the tradition alive. And it remains in the simple fact that people live on every habitable island in the Pacific, from the largest to the smallest, from the wettest to the driest, because centuries ago, brave men and women climbed into wooden canoes and sailed into the unknown. The story of the Polynesian navigators is a testament to the power of human determination and the depths of human knowledge. It is a reminder that our ancestors were not primitive or backward, but skilled and intelligent and brave. It is a reminder that the ocean, which seems to us today to be an empty and forbidding place, was once a highway, a network of routes connecting island to island, a world full of possibility and promise. As you drift off to sleep tonight, let yourself imagine that you are on the deck of a voyaging canoe, lying on your back, looking up at the stars. Feel the gentle rocking of the hull, the cool night air on your skin, the soft murmur of voices around you. You are part of something larger than yourself, part of a great tradition of exploration and discovery, part of the long chain of voyagers who have crossed the oceans of the world in search of new lands and new lives. The stars wheel overhead. The ocean murmurs its eternal song, and somewhere in the darkness, beyond the horizon, new islands are waiting to be found. Sleep well, and dream of distant shores. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until we meet again in the past, rest peacefully. Good night.